You are now tuned in to the Cosmic Convos podcast, your number one source for accurate, relevant, and thought-provoking astrological conversations in the podcast nation. The place where stars and minds align.
Peace. You are now tuned into the Cosmic Convos podcast. I'm your humble host, Herut, and got my good brother here, Brother Ra. How you doing?
Oh, brother, just enjoying the tides and the seasons. How about yourself, King?
Hey, man, just enjoying life, man, learning more, experiencing more, stuff like that, man. So I don't have any complaints, man.
Me either, my brother. Life is good.
Indeed. But before we get too far, I want to remind you all that this episode is brought to you by Push It Forward Media Group, Calibrucia Astrology, and our patrons on Patreon. Big up to the patrons out there. Thank you all for the support, everything that you guys bring to the table. We want to give a big shout out to y'all and stuff like that, and just remind all the listeners that you want to ask questions, you want to be more a part of the show. We do these shows live, and the patrons can tune in while we're doing it live, and at some point we'll even let some people do some call-ins and stuff like that. So if you want to be a part of that process, go hit us up on Patreon or whatnot. You see the ticker, look at the ticker at the bottom, and it'll tell you how to get to that and how to follow us on everything. But in usual fashion, you can find us on Instagram at Cosmic Convos. That Cosmic Convo, actually. So that's COSMICCONVO. That's on Instagram. And you can follow us there. There you'll see our link tree. You can connect on any of the platforms that we're on. We're on all of them. We have another one that we're going to announce soon. I think I'll probably see something about that in a couple days, so I'll let you guys know that when that comes. But you can also follow Push It Forward on Instagram at Push It Forward, PUSHITFWD on Instagram. And you can also catch us on the web with that same spelling, pushitforward.com. There you can find this podcast, and you can find charts. You can a whole host of things, and also some of the other projects that I'm personally working on. I'm a filmmaker, so I got a short film coming, so you'll be able to link to all that stuff as well. Brother Ra, how can the people get a hold of you?
Just kind of make an announcement. The website is in for stall process because we've had some challenges with some language barriers. The individuals I'm dealing with are not from this country, so we've had some snags and issues. But as soon as it's ready to hit the ground and get running, I will definitely make that announcement. Otherwise, though, it seems to be working quite well. It's been working for the entirety of the podcast. You can always hit me up on IG via Shechem Ra, or you can hit me up on Facebook via Shechem Ra. And if those two don't work, then the ultimate solution is to hit me up at calipurusha@gmail.com.
Indeed. Yes, make sure you hit up Brother Ra, man. Definitely hit up Brother Ra, man. He got some good things for you, man. Get you right. You know what I'm saying?
Get you right and tight.
Indeed. Well, here we're at episode 12. Our intention, was to drop an episode at the end of last week, but we had some things that came into play that kind of changed the plans a little bit. But so my apologies for all that. People hit me up. That's like, man, what episode? But we'll make up for it, man. We'll make up for it or
Definitely.
whatnot, man. But man, right? It's some interesting things going on. Some things coming to fruition. Some stuff that we talked about on the podcast earlier about the actual COVID. Right? We talked
Things
about
mutate,
it.
huh?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's unfortunately, that's one of those things that's coming to fruition or whatnot. What's your thoughts on that?
The sun is in a fire sign, isn't it?
Yeah, there it is.
Right. Remember, I said that when the sun goes into fire signs, right, especially, of course, throughout the summer, right, during the dog days, and when sun enters into really when it's energized in some way beyond water, any type of earth uh, or air sign, right? Fire signs typically energize, right, the sun, and the sun then, of course, permeates back to us, and then that energy then kind of creates a increase. It's like fanning the flames of
Yeah,
something, right?
yeah.
And so the sun rules and governs, right? All the energies in the solar system, but specifically, we notice that, for example, during the daytime, right, illnesses subside, right?
Yeah.
And during the night, they pick up. Well, same thing happens astrologically, but kind of in the opposite order when the energy on the planet is increased, whatever is the recipient therein can be inflamed, right? Or can be the fire can be stoked, right, if you will. And stoking a fire melts, changes, transforms. That's what heat does, right? It alters shapes. And so that shape of the coronavirus, I would surmise, probably has more spikes on it, right, than originally. That's why that's maybe possibly the level, because they say, quote unquote, that it's 70% more contagious, not more deadly, but more contagious. And so I would imagine those spikes, and it's strange that it's called the corona virus, right? The sun has a corona, right? And so, you know, that change, I wouldn't surmise it would mutate again. If it does, then it will become more deadly, right? But the increase, yeah, but the increase of the contagion level, right? It's definitely, I would say, and we don't know everything yet, but those spikes have increased, right? As far as the number of spikes that are on there, and the spikes literally, it's a protein that allows it to attach, right? So it makes more sense for it to become more virulent and more effective at being attached or transmission because, like I said, those spikes are on there and it allows them to participate and integrate in other environments fairly quickly. So that was actually something I was going to mention. It's funny that we are here because pretty much everything we've said so far has really manifested, right? Take, for example, right? We talked about the economy, right?
Yeah.
Yes, the unemployment rate has skyrocketed this year, but strangely enough, a lot of people have done well this year as well, right? And those
Yeah.
stimuluses have stimulated the economy enough to keep it going, right? Well, if we don't continue, and again, it's trying to stop the economy from forestalling, and it's excellent that we're talking about this because of today's show, right? But um, it's trying to keep the economy from from stalling out, from going put 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 put, in a major recession, almost depression. Well, next year, right, and of course, this whole vaccination thing, right? They say 50% of the Americans are against taking it, right?
Yeah.
Right. This is going to affect things as far as the economy is concerned, and we're going to get into that. Actually, we're going to get into that in today's show. Shout out to Kes Kim Nu Anki Ma'a, right? You asked, and here it is, right? Um, but yeah, those things have come to pass, right? pretty much everything we have pretty much laid out thus far has transitioned. So Trump, obviously, right, is doing his best to try to make this right prediction that he's supposed to win come true. And
Yeah.
as we can see, right, just not gonna happen.
Nah.
So, right,
Sorry.
good astrologer always can, weed out the confusion and hairline and really point out that this is what's going to transpire, and it has. And we're going to have more predictions like that as we go. So use this knowledge, to really plan your life in advance so that you can really see the curveballs coming.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. We got a couple questions, whatnot. So, want to jump into some questions real quick before we jump into the topic?
Let's do it.
All right. So we got one question about, something that we call in the system the Uppergrahas, and specifically they asked about the Uppergraha Gulika, and its malefic implications.
Um, so the Uppergrahas is not a widely known Vedic astrology subject. It's kind of one that's hidden for very good reason, right? Um, most of the Uppergrahas are very negative in their outcomes, and the reason is because they actually represent the nodes of the planets, right? Most people don't know that those nodes, right? Just like they have on the Earth, they have them on Saturn, they have on Mars, they have on all the other planets, right? And so nodes are very mysterious, hidden, unexpected type of energies. And they're not meant to be understood by the rational mind. Not in the sense of what they do as far as opening and closing portals. So Gulika, right, is one of the nodes of the moon. Oh, excuse me, one of the nodes of Saturn, right? And Galika gets a pretty bad rap, and I'm not going to say rightfully so, but it's a planet that just doesn't harbor any real powerful adaptive energies. It's really it's excuse me, it's related to Saturn in the sense that it's like Saturn's needle, right? Or Saturn's kind of prod, if you will, right? That's what Galika is more of representing. It represents, the thing that's going to push your button, right, in an area. Well, if it's in the first house, right, of course, the button to be pushed would be, right, your health, right? Major issues with health, especially as you get older. And also depends on the conjunction and the proximity of the degree, right? So that all makes a big impact. Everything makes an impact. Benefics, aspects, all those things can somewhat nullify Galika's effect. But, right, if it's in a house that's not conducive to negative energies, it's going to it's going to present a great deal of challenges, right? It really kind of creates loss, if you will, but loss in order to understand the impermanence of life, the value of something that can be taken away from you, right? So for it's in the first house, you appreciate as you get older, your body, right, begins to tell you that, look, this is more important. You should value this. This is something that you need, right? If it's in the second house, it definitely can be family, right? It really does hit the physical aspects of things harder, right? Family, right? Any part of your body, right, that is represented by the second house can also be impacted. Now, the third house, sixth house, they kind of don't do so bad with malefics, especially with Galika, right? And so it's wise to study them from that perspective because you know the Upagrahas can give you very benefic things in the chart. It can uplift certain areas if it's placed well, right? So it's not all doom and gloom, but it's hard to get them placed well in a chart. And so they literally can create a lot of issues, not things that are necessarily overt, unless again those degrees are very tight, and unless they're conjunct certain lords of the how of the chart. But other than that, right, it's more of a subtle influence, right? It's not something that's completely just 100% like the planets, because the planets themselves have enough power to disseminate whatever is needed. They're almost like, um, I want to say, they're like hints that if you don't pay attention to, can become very disastrous. So that's why they're called Uppergrahas, because they're not planets that necessarily are going to, because remember Upachaya, like Upa means up, to grow, right? So it's not something that readily hits you unless again it's really something that's very severely placed in the chart. So I hope that kind of addresses it. But we're gonna have a show on Uppergrahas where we get into what they are, how they work, and where they can be somewhat seen as beneficial.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. Um, we got another question. Kind of a mundane type of question. Wanted to know about, ask specifically about the Nile Valley, but we'll generalize it and speak of seeing um, water shortages astrologically.
Yeah.
What to look for?
Well, so that's a part of the science that deals in Samhita, right? And you have different aspects of Jyotish, or Vedic astrology, or this astrology. Um, One is called Samhita, and that deals in things that are more phenomenally around dealing around the Earth, such as um, comets, meteors, um, things that deal as far as crops, right? Agriculture,
Mm-hmm.
um, omens, right? Different things like that, commodities, right? World events, right? Mundane astrology is really more of what Samhita is all about, right? It is really mundane astrology. And so one of the things that we notice in Samhita is that um, Venus has an effect, right, on the rains, right? And it's purported that when Venus is prominent in the sky, as far as the heaven, as far as the 10th, 11th, 12th houses, it's a good proponent that rain will be ensuing. The way that you look at it is that if Saturn, right, is at the time of the season, as far as the rainy season, if Saturn looks gray or smoky, right, or like where it's monotone colored, right, because you can see Saturn is yellow, right? It has yellow. You can see the rings. You can see it, right, if you have a decent telescope. So when it looks gray, right, or like it's obscured, right, they also say that drought can ensue, right? And so this is the science that you really delve into, and the text that you want to get into is called the Brihat Samhita by Vara Mahira, right? Um, he's the person that authored the text. He's kind of like the go-to on mundane astrology, and it's actually great that that question is presented, because that's really a lot about what the show is about today. Um,
Yeah.
is how do we understand this astrology via um, the financial markets and stocks and trading, and with that being said, the first place we look to is Brihat Samhita, because in Brihat Samhita they talk about the agricultural and the effects that the planets have on weather, right, on crops, right. And if you understand anything about the basis of trade, right? Commodities is the primary, or was the primary original, right, means as far as trade is concerned, right? Even Africans, right, which is where one of the first things that were traded, right, was considered livestock.
Yeah.
So, um, you know, if you're not understanding how these commodities work as far as um, the Samhita is concerned, as far as mundane astrology is concerned, really mundane astrology is the fundamental basis, right, of financial astrology, or using it in the stocks. It's the basis of it, right? And understanding how nations, right? Well, we're going to go through a list of things to talk about what we have to understand to really grasp the science. And the thing about this science that you have to really incorporate more than astrology, right? To understand what's going on. You can't just, astrology is kind of the bedrock, but you have to know a lot of other factors that come into how things work in the world, right? How things work in nations, how even things work in government, right? In order
Yeah.
to really grasp how to read and understand the fluctuations of stocks per, astrology. Um, so you have to understand Samhita. You also have to understand Jatakam, right? Or natal or personal astrology, natal astrology, right? And in order to understand, because they go hand in hand, and we're going to talk about how in a minute, right?
Yeah.
But you have to understand that form of astrology as well. So you really need a broad understanding and a deep understanding of how things work as a whole before you can truly use the science to predict and to buy and purchase stocks, right? Um, you know, it's not an easy thing, right? Predicting for people is easy. I'll tell you why, because it's one person, right?
Yeah.
Right? It's not too much you can do that I can't see, right? But for people, groups of people, right? Like countries, cities, states, organizations, right? There's a lot of people. And so it's harder to see because you're measuring things from a larger context. And so the first thing that you want to understand is your own abilities as an astrologer. Certain astrologers are good at certain things, right?
Yeah.
Certain ones aren't, right? I'm pretty good at mundane astrology. I mean, it's not hard for me to do because I can see how things are working. And in an astrologer's chart, you want to have an extremely strong fifth house. Extremely, I'm talking about very pristinely strong fifth house, because that is the house that literally gives foresight.
Hmm.
And if you're an astrologer that maybe deals better in natal astrology, right? Right. Where your first house is connected to your third and the ninth, right? You can still do astrology. It doesn't mean you can't. It's just the way you do it is from a different perspective. The fifth house is the house that you really want to look to see in your own chart and say, you know what, can I really see patterns? Can I see things? And do I have insight? Right. That's a key dead giveaway. Right. The Lord of
Hmm.
the fifth, as well as Jupiter, all are planets that have to be face placed fairly strong in order to be able to use, right, astrology to predict.
Yeah.
So you always look at yourself first, right, and look to see what strengths you have and what challenges you may have as far as your gifts are concerned, or your knack or your abilities. The other thing is that you also want to look at, really, do you have any connections to people, right, that are in place to give you expert knowledge, right, on how things work. Now, trust me, right, you have the ability to garner a great deal just by understanding how stocks work in a very intimate way. But there's people that literally almost can use this can use their predictive ability to do things without astrology in that field, if you know what I mean. They follow the trends enough. They know the highs and the lows. They know the ins and the outs. They have the inroads. They do all those things to really become very keen at what they do, right? And if they're wise, they contact astrologers to validate what they know.
Yeah.
But you should have connections to someone that I'm talking about a stockbroker. I'm talking about someone that really does really understand the science in a very intricate way, because there's just so many nuances that you may not see based on what you think you know about the market, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
there's real quick. I mean, I think we mentioned a couple of these books before, but you know, people think that this stuff is random, like what happens in the markets and increases and decreases are just random. But I mean, even take astrology out of it. You understand what I'm saying? There's all types of trends. You got cycles by Dewey that tracks trends. And the funny thing about it is because as I mentioned before, I pretty heavy in the Bazi system, right?
mhm,
The four pillars Chinese system. And one time I was like teaching a class, and you can set um, any of those cycles and kind of line them up with what's going on Bazi wise year by year. And if you
mhm.
know with the elements how they impact the market, it's almost a 1-to-1 correspondence and dips and highs. Dips,
Right.
you know.
Yeah. There's cycles, because when you're in it, you see the unfold. If you're a stockbroker, right, and you've been in it for 10, 20 years, there's just things that you just know are going to happen,
Yeah.
right? Based on your experience, based on what happens on a normal basis. So, you know, you maybe not have the best of stockbrokers, but you want to have somebody that definitely has been in the game and lost, right? Because you can't be in this game and expect not to lose.
Yeah.
I don't care how great of an astrologer you got. I don't care how great the stock market is. Put it to you this way, right? Human action is unpredictable, even with astrology to a degree. And the reason I say that is because, for example, let's use an example. The United States of America is now at the point of introducing a vaccine, right? This affects the stock market
Yeah.
majorly.
Mm-hmm.
There's a split in America, 50-50, right? 50% say they more than likely will get it. This is per whatever poll, right? That I heard this on CNN earlier today. It was a poll, and 50% of Americans were viably ready to take the vaccination, and 50% of America is like, I'm good. I'll take my chances. Right?
Yeah.
It's not good for the economy, not good for the markets, because what that there's an underlying statement that says that this still could potentially go bad, right? As far as COVID is concerned for the next year to 2 years.
Yeah.
That doesn't give people a good feeling as far as lending money, right? To make things happen for corporations, because the buying power of the people is going to be reduced, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, there's just so many things that you have to literally look at. I mean, for example, this is just something to take into consideration, and it won't happen anytime soon, right? But when it does happen, this is a key marker. When Mars goes retrograde in Libra, right, stocks drop, because it creates instability in as far as society is concerned,
Mm.
right? Just a dead it's a dead giveaway, right? The markets are going to usually drop, right? That doesn't happen, but every what? 2 years, right? And then on top of that, it may not happen if Mars doesn't go retrograde in that sign, it may be even
Hmm.
longer, right?
Yeah.
So again, right, these are just things that when you begin to understand Samhita, those are things that you can denote that this is something that's going to transpire, and you can use that to gauge what's going on. But you have other planets, you have other things that are impacting, right, the markets. So, for example, Mars just went into Aries, right? Now, usually when Mars goes into Aries, there's a currency change. The currencies drop usually. It hasn't happened too much right now, but with Trump not signing the the bill, right?
He signed it. He signed it.
Well, with him not signing it, right? But for
Yeah.
prior to, right,
Hmm.
the stocks were definitely right not looking well, right, as far
Yeah.
as the impact that that has, right, on how things play out. So these are things that all these things, like I said, human behavior, right? No one can control what Trump does, right?
Yeah.
No one. I mean, for all intents and purposes, right?
He
He
barely
did
can.
what he wanted to do. In the end, right? He did what was common sensible, obviously, right? Because had he gone out, let's put it this way, had he gone out on the note that he didn't sign it, it would really look bad on him. Right?
Yeah.
So he knew he tried to play chess, but he played checkers instead, right? So, right,
That's a great
right.
way to put it.
Yeah. He tried to play chess, but it was already signed, man. You should have did that before, right? You should have been 2 or 3 moves ahead, but you reacted, right? And so
Yeah.
by his reaction, right, the lay of the land says, "Oh, he's not going to sign it. Whoa, what's going to happen? Whoa, what's going to be the future outcome of the nation for the next right? How are we going to right?" That that panic creates market fluctuations,
Yeah.
right? And that's key to understanding that you have to watch what's going on. So let's get into some of the things that really we need to look at, bar none, in order to really grasp what's going on, to use the science to really predict as far as financial markets are concerned. So the first thing you want to do, right, is look at um, the first thing you want to look at is the date of incorporation, right, of the company that you plan on investing in. Now, you may not have the time of incorporation, which would be even better if by some means you could get the time, right? But let's just say you have the date of incorporation. You want to look at that specifically as like a birth chart for the company or for
Yeah.
the the entity that you're going to invest in, right? That is the chart that kind of guides the life of what it is that you're dealing with, right? That has to be examined thoroughly because you need to match that with the actual stock that it represents, right? Meaning that the planet has a inter interconnection, right, with whatever it is that's being sold or whatever services are being rendered,
Yeah.
right? So you have to look at those things very closely. For example, let's just say, for example, you're looking at a company and the company has a product and you see Venus is damaged, right? That company is not going to have a very good PR department, right? PR is crucial in making money, right? Coca-Cola, Pepsi, right? You name it, they have a PR department, right? PR doesn't include just public relations in the sense that uh, you deal with uh, you have the face of the company, right? It intimately also deals in how the company can literally save face or rebound, right, from an issue. Because remember, markets are meant to flux, right?
Yeah.
They're meant to fluctuate. If Venus is strong, they can impact the public very well, right? Their branding is done properly, right? That's something that is not taught, But you must understand it's not mentioned in any of the real texts, but understanding that Venus is the power to woo the people. It's literally the ability to sell your brand, right? If that Venus is weak in the chart, especially of course depending upon what the commodity or what the market or whatever it is that you're looking to invest into, right? If Venus is weak, right, it's a good chance that the company won't do well, right, in times of peril or in times that kind of are like this. You want to invest in those companies that are going to literally, when the tough gets going, right, the opposite happens, right? They can withstand the storm, which holds your money in some protective way, right? It protects your money in some kind of right way where you're not worried that if something happens, it's going to go bye-bye, right?
Yeah.
That's just an example. Go ahead.
Got a question. So, in regards to just something you mentioned, a little second ago, how would one go about finding the time of incorporation for a company? Have you come across that before? Where have you seen that information at?
You just have to know the people that you're dealing with.
Okay, so you're talking about someone this to
First-hand
know
knowledge,
that you
yeah.
have to know that person to. Okay, all right, I get what you're saying.
But if
Indeed.
you don't have the time of incorporation, you can get the date of incorporation.
Yeah.
That you can get usually, right? Especially from the bio or the portfolio that you're looking into. They usually have a date,
Yeah.
right?
It's
That's
public
usually what
information. You should be able to
yeah,
find that.
public information. Exactly. So if you see
Yeah.
Venus is debilitated with with no real strong indications that it can be offset, right? You might want to just be mindful of how they're going to deal with their public image, how they're going to deal with branding, how they're going to deal with impacting the public, how they're going to deal with the packaging, right? All those things are Venus, right? So that's important to know, right? All these other things, of course, are important to know, right? The CEO, which is the sun, right? In that chart, how well is the sun placed? And based on the commodity or the item being invested in or traded. That's another thing you have to look into. So again, that's the first piece is just the actual date of incorporation, date/time of incorporation.
Yeah.
The next kind of thing that we want to consider here is you want to look at the date that the actual stock goes live, right? The IPO date, right? That date, you can get the time on that, right? If you're
Yeah.
watching carefully, you can get the time on that. They just had Airbnb, right? They just went, their IPO just came out and they started at $68. I think they went up to 128, 138 real quick. I don't know what has happened since then, but it was an excellent time for them to start that process because the way the planets were placed, right? And it probably would do fairly well considering, right, that things continue to go the way they go as far as COVID is concerned. Because if anything changes, every company is going to suffer, right? It just doesn't matter. But can they withstand that suffering? Can they withstand the storm? That's the difference,
Yeah.
right? So the other
Yeah,
piece of the puzzle,
that'd
of
be a
course,
good one. That right now, especially for a company like that, because that's a tempting
very tempting.
stock. That'll be one to definitely run. I'm gonna do that myself.
Yeah,
For
check it
that
out.
one in particular. Yeah. Because
Following
times.
it's because of the times, right? It's a very we got to see kind of deal, right? But they started off very well, right? Very well. Saturn is in a very good position, right, for Airbnb because Saturn represents land, right? Property, structures, buildings, right? Saturn is in Capricorn, right? Very solid, stable dealings when it comes to those types of ventures, right? Rahu is in Taurus, right? So so Saturn is trined with Rahu, and Rahu is tourism, right? Most people don't. How's Rahu tourism? Rahu is foreign cultures,
Yeah.
right? Anything that's not of your culture, right, is Rahu. And Airbnb is big because you can leave one country, go to another country, and be at home, right? So again, right, and there's other factors that were in play, right, with regards to that IPO. But again, right, looking at that, I would looking at when it goes live, and then watching it because literally it went from 68 to 128 in minutes, right? So just good things to know, right? Know when the IPOs are going to drop. Be very keen, right, on watching the Motley Fool, right? Because I do deal with trading. I deal with this, right, for my clients. So the Motley Fool, right, is a good place to subscribe if you're serious, right?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
have a lot of good information on there, excellent information on IPOs, companies are going to drop, best good investments. They usually give you like a top 5 pick, a lot of things like that. There's another company that you can look at it's not doing so well, and it's kind of per because we're developing a different culture right now is what's happening. Online culture is becoming more prevalent just because the way everything is structured right now, and it's probably going to stay that way for a good while. People are not going to be, COVID slap hat. They're not gonna just jump out and get right back into society. It's going to be a gradual thing. And one of the companies that I was looking at investing in is Stitch Fix. People order clothes, they order outfits and things like that, and they're they have a very volatile type, stock. It starts off low, it kind of goes a little high, then it goes low, then it kind of maintain. Over the last 5 years, it's been very unstable, right, and not very rewarding just from an investment point of view. But
Yeah.
let's say, for example, right? Let's hope not, but let's say, for example, that for all intents and purposes, COVID lasts another 2.5 years, right? Stitch Fix's stock is going to go up, right? Because people are not going to stop wearing clothes, but they are going to stop shopping,
Yeah.
right? And so that's what I mean by watching, right, how those particular markets going to change. When Rahu enters into Aries, right, within the next year and a half, right, things are going to change drastically, right? So again, it's very good to watch, right, how Rahu and these planets move because it gives you a good beat on what's going to happen. But right, remember Rahu in Aries wants war, right? Ketu in Libra, which is the opposite of where Rahu is going to place, it is dissatisfied, right, with how justice is being rendered because Libra a lot of times deals in things that are equilibrated or balance, right, or liberty, if you will. So this is something, right, just to keep in mind. If you're investing in Raytheon, if you're investing in uh, um, uh, Lockheed Martin, if you're investing in things like that, you want Rahu to be in Aries, right? 'Cause stocks are about to go bananas, right? Rubber, right? When we're at war, rubber goes up, right? Oil, what? Goes up, right? Because these things are needed, right? This is what you have to understand, the psychology of how things work behind the scenes and why these stocks do what they do. So the next thing you want to understand, of course, is just the type of investment that you're dealing with. How does it fall? What does it fall astrologically speaking, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, when the sun goes into Aries, cotton goes up, right? What what's the common sense behind that? Everything, all these are common sense things. It's not the sky is just one sense and then we have another sense, right? We call it cosmologics for a reason, right? Because there's a logic behind the cosmos. So when sun goes into Aries, why does cotton go up? Very logical.
I don't know, man. I don't know about that one. Maybe
Time. Heat. What do you wear in the summer?
cotton.
Cotton.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Very logical.
Yeah.
Right.
See that?
It's not. You see what I mean? When Mars is in Libra retrograde, Mars is, remember, Libra is a sign of balance.
Yeah.
Mars is in its antithesis sign, and it's acting as if it's looking back to handle something to deal with that wasn't dealt with to come forward. That is usually instability.
You know that just a quick aside. Even that, some people don't know. Like the scale for Libra is actually a scale that you use in the marketplace.
That's right.
It's not like the Ma'at scale. It's a
Mm-mm.
scale that you use in the
That you weigh
marketplace.
things with. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. No, in the marketplace, not ma'at. No, right.
yeah,
As in the sense of what's fair, what's
a fair deal.
equitable,
Yeah,
right? Not just in the sense of justice, but in the sense of fair exchange. What? No robbery,
yeah,
right? That's what Libra's all about. And when that's
yep.
not right, then you have political unrest. You have unrest at large. And when Mars is in Libra, the sun has to be at least 4, 5, or 6 houses, or 8 house, 5 to, has to be the 5th, 6th, 7th, or 8th house from Mars. Meaning it's in an opposition. So Mars is in opposition when it's in retrograde. You see, it's a logic behind it. Right?
Hmm.
But when the sun goes into Aries, right, the heat is coming. Right, oil goes up when the sun is in Aries. Why? Even edible oils, because
Hmm.
people get out more. Right,
Yeah,
when you're
traveling more,
right,
moving.
they travel more. Right,
Hmm.
more plane trips, more vacations. Oil what goes up. So
Yep.
there's always a logic behind this. It's not just arbitrary. Right. But the next thing you want to look at is, like I said, your horoscope. Now, if you're trading, you want to look. If your fifth house, 11th house, second house are all fairly integrated well, you can probably do well in stocks, right? If your sixth house has any major negative impacts along with the 12th house on any of those houses, then you could potentially invest and then lose.
Hmm.
So you want to vet your own chart as far as your ability to really do these things, because you know not everybody's here with the ability to invest. It's just not everybody's cup of tea, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have the ninth house strong, which is the house of fortune, right? And when I say fortune, I mean in the sense of all around blessings, right? Like that that your ventures will be looked upon as highly favored, or the supreme being will say it's inculcated in what your design is. That's the ninth
Yeah.
house. If that's not strong, right, you could invest and only reap a very nominal return. But if the ninth house is strong with it, right, then it's almost saying that I don't want to say God is favored, because there is really, you choose those things for yourself. But in essence, you're at the right place at the right time, and the right result yields, because the ninth house is also an extension of the fifth house, which is literally the ability to project or foresee.
Hmm.
So, those are the houses that you want to look at your own chart to make sure they're tight. I know, Atef, you got Jupiter in the ninth, right?
Yeah.
So, right, and you have planets in the fifth, right? So your ability to predict, right, is fairly strong, right? Because those planets aren't other places. They could be in the third, they could be in the second, they could be in the 11th, right? They're not,
Hmm.
right? They're in those positions. And so when you know that, then you can literally say, I know that my return will come back it won't come back void, right?
Yeah.
Because you're using the knowledge to do it. That's the whole point.
Hmm.
Ninth house is also the ability to hear wisdom,
Yeah.
to listen to advice, right?
Yeah.
If someone has a damaged ninth house, many times they won't listen to you. I don't care what you tell them,
Yep.
right? So These are all things personally that you have to know about yourself before you consider yourself an investor, right? That's why you call an astrologer and say, hey, how do I look for investing? If you're in a dasha period that's running the 8th, 12th, 6th house, maybe not a time to start investing, or investing in chunks, small things, right? Small gains, right? Because this is a period that brings unexpected changes, loss, and self-sacrifice, right? So these are all things you want to know, right? About you.
Yeah.
The other thing you want to look at is the actual chart of the person that owns the company, right? The CEO or the owner or the person, the head person in charge, because they're like the CEO. That's what CEO means. It's chief executive officer, right? He's the person that is overseeing. He's like the king of that particular entity, right? And so you want to know if the king, because if the king is due for a fall, the company's going to fall, or the company will have some flux, because every time there's a change of power, right? Companies have these kind of situations where there's issues, right? If the leader has issues, you can guarantee that the company is going to run into some headlong problems, lawsuits, right? I'm talking about class action lawsuits, right?
Yeah.
Um, Dealing internally with how that person treats his employees or her employees, right? If you see that chart is dictatorial, it has a lot of negative influences. The companies may make money, but also may not do well in the internal side, which creates splits, which creates hostile takeovers, because people start leaking information, trading, right? There's just the person that's over that company, you definitely want to vet, right? Even a date of birth, maybe not a time. If you have time, times are always best. But if not, time, date, right? Looking at what's going on, looking at transits in his chart or her chart, looking at what's being hit, right? If the sun is conjunct Saturn in their chart, you best believe, if it's not placed fairly strong and has strong aspects, that person could definitely hit rock bottom, and then definitely take the company with them through a series of bad choices.
Yeah.
Just, what I mean? These are things that you want to consider. Even the wife. I mean, I get deep. Even the wife. You got your wife's chart? Bring that to me.
Yeah, that's
Right.
yeah, because like with Jeff Bezos, his
I mean,
wife
let's get with
hit
it,
him
right?
hard.
Dr. Dre. Let's talk about Dr.
Dr.
Dre,
Dre.
right?
Yeah.
He pulled a smooth one, didn't he? He put a smooth one, man. Got
Wow.
pictures of the prenup took pictures of the prenup because she ripped it up. Got pictures and said, no. You coming in with what you left with. You leaving what you came with, right? Them hush puppies, right? And that Volkswagen, that's yours, right?
That's a
Right. Them hush
cold
puppies in that
piece right
VW
there.
still waiting on you, right? And I'll break you off 300,000 a month, take care of your expenses, right? Say la vie, because you're trying to get 2 million, right? Which she's probably not going to get, because the court has already stated, right, that the prenup is valid. So, you know, looking at those types of things, let's say for example, he was still trying to run Beats by Dre, right? Let's say he was still the CEO, the person running it, right? And you look at and you see his chart is very strong, it's viable, and something that's going on internally with this whole kind of prenup thing, the company's going to do okay, right? The company's going to resound. It's not going to be no one's going to, because think about it, if he's getting taxed, right, in some way, the company has to, it's a compensation type thing. Not to say the company's going to lose, but he's a representative of it, so therefore there is some type of derivative effect, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So things like that, these things are very sensitive because you're dealing with people's investment. Investment, from what we study, is it's high on the tree of life, right? I'm talking about large investments, not just a few dollars here, a few dollars here. I'm talking about making big money with money, right? you have to have wise counsel with that.
Oh yeah.
So again, right, the owner of the IPO, right? Now, the other things that come into play, right, is really where you understand how astrology works on a mundane level. So understanding the country, right, that the actual uh, uh, venture is placed into, right?
Yeah.
Because if it's placed in a country that's has a lot of, let's say for example, right, and this is wouldn't be a wise one, but let's say you choose Sudan, right, right,
Yeah.
and Sudan right now is in a lot of change. There's a lot of change going on inside Sudan, right? But let's say your company, right, a gold company you have in Sudan, right? You got to take into consideration the Sudanese environment and the country and the underpinning astrological things that are going on there because the country is trying to split. There's a piece of them they're trying to annex. They're trying to keep the piece from annexing, right? There's a lot of small groups that are fighting, right, for power,
Mm-hmm.
right, in that area because it's a time where they're trying to gain some footing and groundhold as far as establishing a very viable country, and it's just a lot of change. So it wouldn't be wise to invest there, despite how well it might look. Right? It might look like, man, this gold is like the cheapest gold. I can get it at this rate per ounce. Blah 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 blah. But so you can't even get the gold out the country, right? Because right, you got
Yeah.
people at the airport waiting, right, for the go or waiting for you or waiting for whatever. So you know what I mean. It just you have to take those things into consideration. You have to know mundane astrology before you start doing this. Right. If you're going to use this knowledge to invest to make stock purchases, you need to know mundane astrology, bar none. Right. If you don't know how those things, like I mentioned, right, oil increases when the sun is in Aries. Right. Well, what happens if that country, right, has Saturn in Aries, where that particular, you see what I'm saying? That's going to be a
Yeah.
different because Saturn, he helps prices, right? Because he hurts the commodity. It's strange, right? He creates what's called scarcity. Scarcity drives costs up, right? So and Saturn creates, he lowers the amount of what it is, but he also increases the cost at the same time. Jupiter does the very opposite. It makes it plentiful, so the costs do what? Go down,
Yeah.
right? So if you, and we call those bearish and bullish trends, you have to understand that. We'll talk about that in a minute. But nonetheless, right, you have to know those intricate, right, ways that those planets are going to affect that particular country. Because if, let's say, the Saturn is in Aries in that country and the sun transits, right, gold, not gold, but oil is still going to be challenged to some degree, right? Because it still has to go through that particular zone where Saturn is saying, I'm blocking you, so only the rich get richer, right? Saturn makes sure that it's scarce or minimized, right? So that if you have buying power, it's the wisest time to invest because you get the most of you reap the reward more, right? Because it's more valuable. So understanding how countries work with regards to their astrological makeup. For example, right? America is Sagittarius ascendant, right? So anytime the sun goes into Aries for our country, right, it does very, very well, right? Because it's in the ninth house and it's in its ninth house exalted, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a very prominent position. So for our country, we do very well in oil. Well, if you look at, I believe, North Korea, right? I think they're Gemini ascendant and they have about 3 or 4 planets in the fourth house in Virgo. When the sun hits an Aries for them, it's quite different, right? even though it's in the 11th house, right? It's still the relationship that it has to the fourth house is what we call a quincunx or a 6-8 position. So not always it doesn't do well. They don't have the same underlying factors in their nation. So their chart is gonna their oil is gonna be different, right? So again, these are things you have to know when you're dealing with this. You really need to be adept at that, right? Understanding how countries are set up astrologically, because that is going to be the foretell of how these particular transits and things happen, right?
Yeah.
Now, the other thing is that you have to really kind of understand um, social events, current events, right? So we talked about, for example, Trump, right? He just signed this bill, right? That changed the forecast of the market overnight.
Yeah.
That change, right? And again, each one of these particular events, right, is something that you have to measure. But being able to forecast these events through the mundane astrology is the gift of this science, because you can already say, well, you know what, we're going to be at war, right? Or there's going to be warlike energies in on the planet, right? That Rahu is going to have an expansion, right, of direct force and aggression.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's why it's time to invest in things that go with that energy, right? Right now,
Boing.
commodities, Boeing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rahu is in Taurus, right? And the thing is that being in Taurus, Taurus deals with things that are tangible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Literally literally goods, like not just gold, but anything that's tangible, cotton, uh, wheat, right? Things like that, rice, right? All those things are kind of like second house stuff, right? Those things are right fairly expansive, but they can bubble if Rahu when Rahu leaves, and if Venus isn't in a good position when Rahu leaves Taurus, you can get a bubble and it can pop, right? Where these
Mm-hmm.
things now, because when war comes, when Rahu gets there, right, food is not the main concern, or that energy that literally governs food is no longer receiving the influxes of Rahu, right?
Yeah.
So, right, these are all things that you have to consider, right? Um, Another thing you want to consider is really looking at, like I mentioned, um, different. You want to keep your eye to the street. So the Wall Street Journal, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you notice, Wall Street Journal doesn't just cover economics; it covers a lot of different things that affect economics. That's why people read it, because they rely upon the opinions of the editors and the people that write it to give a clear consensus of what is going to impact their money, right?
Yeah.
So Wall Street Journal, again, the Motley Fool. I tell people, y'all, the Motley Fool is a really good. You pay a small amount, but you get a lot of information that you could use, right?
It is. Yeah.
Um,
They
yeah,
they pick those.
y'all,
They
you
find
subscribe,
those.
you
Those.
subscribe, don't you?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
they pick those steals. They're good at
Hmm.
finding those stocks that you might just not know about up at front.
Yeah, they do. They have a lot of back end stuff that you wouldn't even know unless someone told you. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's it's a big factor. Knowing how different markets work, right? So the Synex is different from right from Wall Street, right? And also understanding how dollars work, right? How currencies work, right? Currencies are different, and the yen is different than the dollar, right? It works very different. The markets are different, right? Even though they have highs and lows and all those types of things in the same basic underlying process, right? It's still very different. For example, India's stock market is different because it's not as old as America's. America's stock market is extremely old.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's probably one of the first stock markets for all intents and purposes. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So, I mean, it's had enough time to learn, right, how to control, right? And then you have to consider the Feds, interest rates, right? Those things are all going to impact, right, financial markets. Again, this is just like looking at a massive conglomeration of moving parts to get an understanding of what the outcome is on this or that. It takes a lot of information to get a little bit of answer, but the little bit of answer goes a long way because it's solidified. You know, this is the trend that's going to happen. This is where it's headed, right? So, again, there's a lot that goes into it. I could sit down and break down each planet based on what it rules and how, but that really comes into understanding how those things work. And again, that's why I teach it, right? So if you want to learn, you can come and sit and we can do these classes and go through them, and I can show you what those planets do, how they work, each house, and so forth. Understanding ingresses, right? When the sun ingresses into this sign, when the moon ingresses into this sign, right? Those are all factors that we have to really study in order to really gain a good foothold on how this works with or in tandem with, right, financial markets or investments. Um,
Indeed.
um, the other thing is considering that, when you look at, for example, dashas, right? Let's say your chart and the company's chart are matched, mixed, right? Let's say that your dasha is running in a antithesis or in an antithetical way to, let's say, the company's dashas. That's a lot of times indication that you can get in and get out, but don't do long-term investments. If your dashas match the company's dashas, it's a great time to make long-term investments, provided everything else checks out. Right?
Yeah.
That's literally means that you can match your energies with their energies, and you're going to reap and sit back and get the passive income, right? As if you were literally a part of that corporation. So, right, all these things come into play, and you have to really be keen again on integrating them into a cohesive whole. Then you take all of this information and then you contact your stockbroker, right? You contact your stockbroker and say, "Look, I want to buy 50 shares, right, of United Airlines." Right? United Airlines, for most of you that don't know, right, keeps usually before pre-COVID, the stocks were about $98 to $100 on average, maybe 103. That's a pretty decent, stable stock, and it varied from time to time, but it stayed at a pretty good rate, about $100, right? It dropped to $39.44 in March due to COVID, due to restrictions in air travel, right? Well, if you know anything about air travel and planets, Jupiter, right, which has been going back and forth between Capricorn, because it dipped into Capricorn already earlier this year,
Yeah.
right? And then it dipped out, right? Now it's back in again. And haven't you noticed air when it went into Sag, even though it was COVID, air travel went up, didn't it?
Yep.
Now air travel is down.
Hmm.
Jupiter rules aviation, right? So again, right, understanding how this works, right? Understanding that these cycles, right, when Jupiter goes into Aquarius, right, in and not this year, because it's going to go backward and forward, and when Jupiter is retrograde and does its dance, right, that's the volatility that you're going to see with the travel, right? Because especially during the summertime, people are going to be, that 50-50 is going to clash. I'm not taking it, right? But I want to travel. Well, you can't travel if you don't take it. Right? I'm just saying I can predict these things because you can see what's unfolding, right?
Yeah.
And so when Jupiter gets into Aquarius at the end of the year, when we are at a stage where not only has the line been drawn, but people have stood their ground and either have accepted or not accepted whatever has been given to the people, right? Then Jupiter will then at that point, air travel will begin to increase again. And when Jupiter gets into Pisces, right, air travel will rebound. So again, right, these are things that you want to consider, right?
Yeah.
In investing in, let's say, for example, airlines. And United Airlines is the one I saw that really had one of the better stocks because it was so solid for so long. And even though it dipped to 39.44, it got back up to $67 within a couple of, I think maybe 2 months. Right.
Yeah.
So, these are just things that you pay attention to watch, right? Because once you know, like for example, if you hear us tell you that there's going to be major shifts for the next year, right? You can bet your bottom dollar, right, that if there's going to be a change in environment or sickness or something, there's going to be less air travel, less people interacting. So that means that it's time to invest and buy wisely, because if you buy wisely, then it'll yield a whole lot more when things return back to normal.
Yeah.
So, that's why this astrology is really potent and powerful, because we can see those things before they come and then make wise investments. One side note before we go, right? Most people follow Robert Kiyosaki, right? A lot of people know who he is. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, wrote a series of books, has a pretty fun game, I think, called Rat Race. A lot of things going on with this guy. Pretty wise financial guru, right? According to him, and I've done some research about what he stated, he's saying Warren Beatty doesn't really buy gold or did buy gold, right, in the past. He said he actually spoke against it. Well, from what I understand, right, gold is going to be worth $15,000 per ounce in the next 4 to 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's worth $2,000 an ounce now. So if you just purchased 3 ounces of gold, you would have made $45,000 in 4 to 5 years, right? And it makes sense the way Jupiter is going, because Jupiter is an indicator of gold in astrology. The sun is an indicator of gold, but the sun is not a planet. It's a planet that deals in regularities, right? It moves 1 degree per day. So it's not something that you can gauge over years of time, but Jupiter is. And Jupiter does also rule gold, right? So, right, again, understanding, if you think about it, and gold hasn't dipped too much, right? It's been pretty stable. But
Mm-hmm.
over time, when you have fluxing changes of currencies, major market changes, COVID, right? People want surety. They want to be able to say, you know what, I know where my money is. I know my money's solid. I can handle it, because currencies change, right?
Yeah.
Gold, right, has a very solid standard. So if things go as predicted, right, you're going to see next year gold jump, right? And if you see a jump, like I'm telling you, buy it then, because you don't want to trying to catch this wave when at the last year when the thing just goes crazy, right? You want to ride it out now. So buy yourself 3 or 4 ounces of gold. Yeah, you'll spend $6,000 to $8,000, but the exponential value of it, the return is immeasurable, right?
You can build up too. I mean, they
Yeah,
sell gram bars, 1 gram
they
bars right
absolutely do
now.
sell gram bars. You can
It
buy a
probably
gram
costs you about
bar. Yeah,
$75 right now.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you can start small, test it, see what it does, right? But again, just knowing how all these things factor in, right, gives you the best bang for your buck as far as making a wise investment. And if you have an oracle, you're even better off, right? Because you can combine that with that, and that creates a complete understanding about what you're doing. So with that being said, right, those are just a few factors that we look at as far as, really understanding how to use this astrology to make wise investments, to make purchases, and to deal in stocks.
Indeed, 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 man. So, I think that's this is definitely going to be an excellent show for everybody listening to this over and over again and stuff like that. Because it's, I mean, we're heading into new territory. You know, we're going to be dealing with a different economy, a different landscape. You want to make sure that you know what's coming so you can move accordingly.
Indeed.
You know, yeah, because I mean, shoot, if you're a server at a restaurant, man, it's about to be rough for you. you got to find something else to do. Not saying that. I mean, some people do that, you know, but I'm just saying, like, it's decision making time for sure. You want to be armed with the best knowledge possible.
Absolutely. You know, put yourself where you're best served, you know, and you serve best because, you know, right now, if you're not planning properly for the next 10 to 15 years, right, the economy is not going to get better, right?
Not
The
for
dollar is
certain
not going to get
industries.
better, right? The
Yeah,
dollar, as we every year, it becomes less valuable, right? And it takes more money to do the same thing, right? And you're
yeah,
not making any more money, right? Right? They're not giving you more to spend because they're charging more. So now
yeah.
is the time to truly invest wisely, right? To use the science, right? In groups as well, right? Because group investments are a lot safer than single investments, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a group that you all have out there that are investing and you want to get these things done for you, contact me, right? I do these for my clients. I've been doing them for years. So let me know if you're interested so we can sit down and really talk about what that might look like for you and the people that you have as constituents.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. Um, and with that being said, this episode was brought to you by Pushing Forward Media Group, Calo Prusha Astrology, and our good people on Patreon. Got one of the brothers in there. I see you in there in the chat, man. Shout out to you, brother, for checking it out and whatnot. People flowing in and out and stuff like that. So, again, you know, if you want to tune in live and stuff like that, man, you know, hit us up on Patreon or whatnot and get looped in. I did have another announcement. I mentioned it early, but I just got the email in. So you know, we're the podcast is now on iHeart as well. So
Oh,
we on
nice.
iHeart Radio.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So that took a little while to get there, but we there, man. So I think I think we are on everything right now. I'm pretty sure we are on everything or whatnot. So shout out to iHeart or whatnot for welcoming, you know, us on. You know what I'm saying? And hopefully we could reach another audience. You know, because they're like number one in podcasting right now. So big ups to them and you know, progress, man. We, you know, slowly but surely,
We understand
just
what it is.
creeping.
Exactly.
Indeed. But you know, like I said before, you know, hit us up with questions and stuff like that, so we can, you know, keep you locked in and stuff like that. They help, you know, formalize some of the shows that we do and stuff like that. So we really want those to keep flowing in.
Yeah,
Or
this
whatnot.
show is to the brothers, right? That you know are on the inside. So you know we don't want you to feel like that because you are you know not physically with us that you're not with us. And so, like I said, this is a shout out to one of the brothers, Kes Kim Nu Anki Ma'a, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Said a lot of the brothers inside wanted information on this topic. So, and it just so happened to be that I was actually working on a project for one of my clients that deals in this matter. So I said, you know what, why not? Kind of, it's like ringing my bell. You're already doing it, so you know, put it out for the people because they may need it. So,
Yeah.
you know, this is all based on your request.
Absolutely, man. And shout out to that brother and everybody that's on the inside that's checking out the podcast, man. Big much respect to y'all, man.
Much
Thank
respect.
you. All right. So you know, if you good, brother, Rod, I don't have nothing else. You got something else? Anything else you want to say before we you know get all the way out of here?
Um, no, we're good. No, I'm good. I'm straight.
Indeed, indeed. So, as usual, like I always say, thank you all for tuning in. We'll be back with another great episode next week. Same time, same place. And we're out. Peace.
Peace.